Review boat. That's what you're watching. Review boat. You think we're crazy, but you won't. Once you hear all our reviews.
It's time that we discuss the best nude scenes in the Howling series. You know what that means? Time to fire up the old pornograph.
You
can't show that stuff here. This is a family show. You better stop it right now. Now let's go to the captain for the reviews.
Well, welcome to our final part of this long retrospective on the Howling franchise. Now, unfortunately, as we go into the last part, I really can't talk about any more books since we covered the last of the novels last time. So instead, we're looking at the two films that are based off of the entire trilogy. Both of these films are written by the Australian filmmaker Clive Turner, who had previously worked as a screenwriter and bit part actor in Howling for the original Nightmare. In a way, both of these are follow-ups to that movie, and they form a sort of trilogy, if you will. So when we look at Howling 5, The Rebirth, not to be confused with The Howling Reborn.
I need you to be strong and stay with me, because you're the one who's gonna have to kill me.
Sort of a Friday the 13th, the final chapter versus the final Friday sort of situation. We look to see if there's anything from the books, and you would think going in, okay, Howling 4 is sort of based completely off the idea that the original Howling film was not slavishly loyal enough. So your immediate assumption would be that Howling 5 would be a slavishly loyal adaptation of the second book, or maybe even the third book, but no. If anything, it draws upon the opening chapter, the prologue of the original novel, and even then only loosely so, whereas the novel opened up with a flashback to this Eastern European town where a group of people got together and decided to kill all the residents of this location because they suspected that one or more of them was a werewolf. Here we have a prologue in which a castle full of people decide that they're going to stage a huge mass homicide / suicide in order to wipe out their entire bloodline lest any more werewolves be in their area and continue to threaten people. And then there's one surviving baby that's taken in by this group who happen to have progeny that eventually in the present are all gathered back to the castle so that we can find out who the werewolf descendant is as opposed to the rest, and they all have these identifying marks on their bodies and such. So, I mean, other than the basic idea of a backstory that happened several centuries earlier, and then a mystery in the present over who the werewolf might be, without the twist of the original book that it's everyone. Howling 5 really resembles the Howling novels about as much as it resembles Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, 10 Little Werewolves. That's not to say it's a bad film in and of itself. Till the release of the film with a very similar name, The Howling Reborn, it was arguably one of the best, if not the best, of the sequels, despite having hardly any connection to any of the other films or the novels or anything else. And despite practically not even having a werewolf in it, it kind of looks like they broke into the shop of the guy who did the effects for the fourth one, stole his suit without him knowing about it, and they just sort of filmed it in silhouette because they didn't know how to operate it properly. Now, Clive Turner, in addition to writing the fifth film, also had a larger part, a major part, as an Australian character who is invited to the castle and who seems to die, although we're going to pretend that he somehow survived. And, you know, if you really stretch credibility, you can say that the film never confirmed that he died. It just strongly implied that he died because his death was off screen. It seems they just had a name change because Clive Turner can't bother to be consistent, and now he's gone to this small California town in the Howling New Moon Rising. It's really trying to tie together the threads of the 4th, 5th, and 6th films into some larger arc. It doesn't bother to connect with the first 3 films, but that's beside the point. But because it's focused more on that, it's once again not particularly concerned with how much it's borrowing from the books themselves. However, if we're really, really generous, maybe we can see some connections. Like, just like in the first, we're dealing with a small California town with some odd people who live there and a person who's come in, and there happens to be a werewolf problem. Like the second book, we have a bunch of clunky exposition that explains what happened in previous stories, and we have the return of the Karen analog from the 4th movie in the cameo appearance, following up on her. So you can say we can latch onto that. The primary werewolf antagonist, spoiler alert, is a female werewolf from the 5th film. Spoiler alert for both movies, actually. And so you can make that connection between her and Marcia. You know, just like in that case, she's hunting down 2 previous survivors, in this case the survivors of the 4th and 5th Howling entries, seeking to take them down because of the knowledge they have or whatever. And like in the 3rd book, you have a major subplot with a police officer who's investigating the whole story. Whereas we're trying to cut it some slack here in terms of how it may qualify as an adaptation. There is no slack to be cut for it as a movie itself. Now let me begin.
No, you don't, Moreno. No, you don't. This is my job. If anyone is going to review Howling 7, it's me. You weren't there. Clive Turner, what did you do? Howling 7, New Moon Rising. Or, as I like to call it, Clive Turner makes a documentary. Because seriously, this movie isn't so much a movie as it is Clive Turner just sitting around in some bumpkin out of nowhere place in California, filming people's daily lives, making stupid jokes, cooking chili, listening to music, and having line dances. There are more line dances than there are werewolves. There is no plot. Basically, the only Australian, Clive Turner, travels to a middle of nowhere place on what he believes to be an expose, when he's really just being set up by a werewolf to kill him because apparently he has to die for some reason. Maybe the devil told him to do it. Considering that at some point there's this investigator going around trying to figure out the reasons these certain people have been dying, and stumbles across a priest who says, "Oh, the werewolf is the greatest agent of the devil." Really feels out of place and disjointed from the rest of the story. None of the actors in it are good. But then again, most of the people in this movie are not actors. They're just, as I said, people from a middle of nowhere town in California. The only actor is the chick that was the main character in the 4th Howling movie, Romy What's-Her-Face. And even her acting was not good. She just delivered the lines, and we don't even see her face for most of her delivering lines. Sound quality wasn't all that good either. I mean, sometimes you have to really strain to hear what's going on. And the werewolf animations. Oh, like, apparently someone just discovered how to use a computer to make really, really crappy computer-generated effects and did a stretched out overlay of a werewolf onto a human. My werewolf transformations are better! There you have it. Howling 7. Which brings about a much-needed close to this series. And don't forget that our captain, M.A. Moreno, puts the cool in Cine-cool.
I guess I'll be handling the MA PSA this time. So, what can we learn from the Howling franchise? Well, this series is kind of like Robert Picardo's transformation in the first film. You know, it starts out great, and you have such high hopes for it. But then it quickly gets really silly. And then it just keeps dragging on and on. And suddenly you're just looking at Dee Wallace and saying, "Why do you keep watching this? Run away! Run away!"
Particle